In this video, you will be introduced to the RStudio environment and will learn some of the basics about working in RStudio. After watching this video, you should be able to navigate the RStudio environment. You should be able to run regions of code or lines of code that are in an R script. You should be able to search for packages in RStudio. You should also be able to search for documentation on the functions that you are working with in RStudio. Welcome to RStudio. RStudio is a user-friendly interface for base R. You can work directly in base R, but RStudio gives you a little bit more point-and-click options to work with the coding language. And so to start, I'll just give you a tour of the RStudio environment and then we'll get started on some exploratory data analysis in R. So in this top left corner, this is where you'll be writing your script. Your scripts will be saved as .r files. And so I'll talk a little bit more about how I've set up this script, but just at a quick glance, you can see that in R, we comment out things with the pound symbol or a hashtag symbol. And so I've set up this data structure to start my code. I like to add a lot of comments to my code because oftentimes I come back to it, so it's important for me to know what the code is, what it's for, as well as what each line means. So this is what I'd like for you to stick with this semester. In your top line of code, you can put either your lab or your homework. I always put my name, especially if it's code. In research, we often have multiple people use code, so I write written by or just write my name, and here we'll have your course. And at the top of each of my scripts, I like to put a purpose, what the code does, so I don't have to go back through and try and figure that out. Occasionally, I'll also put what data files are necessary when there are multiple files. In R, not all of the functions are present in base R. People develop packages or groups of functions. R is open source, so people around the world develop these sets of functions, and you have to load them in. So base R only has so many packages that are already preloaded. So each time you run a script, to be able to use certain functions, you have to load the package in which those functions are located. So some more basic ones like setting the working directory, those are available in base R, but a lot of others like the plotting functions we'll use today are in a separate package. And so in R, below our script, we have our console. So any code that I run will show up in this console. Additionally, any result that I output will show up in this console. And you can also, if you don't want to add anything to your script, you can do commands within the console. They just won't be in the script. For example, if I want to set my working directory, which is this code here, you can see I've commented beside this code what it does. I'll do that first. You can see that code ended up in my console, and then I'll bring in the data, the CSV that we saved of the filtered data. If I want to go ahead and preview what this data looks like, I can type in the command and then reference my data object, which is that dat, and you can see it'll pop up. You can also do very basic math in here. So your console, if you're typing codes in here, they won't show up in your script, but you can also run things from your script into your console. So here I ran head dat. This allows me to look at my data, the structure of it. It shows the first 6 to 10 rows for the most part, and then the string command shows me what each column of data is. So if I scroll up to the top, I can see that the city name, it's considered a factor with 38 levels, so I know I have 38 cities. For numbers, other columns just contain numbers and it'll show those. So this tells me what type of data. You can see I also have integers here, and then numbers or anything that are a continuous data set. So this kind of gives me an idea of what data I have. And if at any point you want to clear the console, you can do that with Control L. And then I didn't mention it, but to run the data into the console, you can hit Control Enter. You can also go up to this code and hit Run Selected Line. You can also choose to run a region and then send to terminal. So if you don't want to use the commands on the keyboard, you can come up to this code. This whole section right here is all about running your code. The next stop in our R tour is the global environment. So the global environment contains the data that you've loaded into R. And if you want to search for a particular data set, you can use the search box. So I've named our data set DAT. So I could come in here and look at the data. So I can see there are 38 observations. So those are my 38 rows or 38 cities, and 144 variables. So I have 144 rows, and if I click on it, it'll pop up this tabular format over here so I can take a look at what I have. This is a bit different than that head function that I just showed you. It shows up a lot more like it would in Excel, so I can see all of that here. This global environment is really helpful when you're using a lot of different data sets. And then when you're first getting started in R, this bottom corner is always really helpful. On this first tab, you have your files, so these will show up instead of importing your files with a R command, like I'm doing here. This read.csv allows me to open a file and assign it to a variable from my working directory. I can open files this way as well. If I generate any plots in R, they'll show up on this plots tab. And as I mentioned earlier, you have to load in packages to get certain functions. And so when you click over here, these are all the packages that I've loaded onto my machine previously. And if I want some more, I can install them by hitting this install button and searching for them. You can also install them directly with code, as you see I'm done over here with this install.packages function. But this is an easy way you can search for packages, so I can see if I was searching for something in the ggplot package group, you can see all the ones that show up here. Some packages can't be searched easily. You have to pull them directly from GitHub, which I'll show you later in the semester how to do as well. And then if you want to update any packages, you can hit this update button to check for updates. And then probably the most important thing for when you're starting out is this help tab over here. So in this top search box, I can search any sort of function or package. So I'll go ahead and search this library function. So you can see it loads the documentation. This is a function that's available in base R. So in this function documentation, you can see the different commands that go, or they're called arguments, that go into this particular function. And then down here it explains what each argument means, what value it will need. And then there are more details about the package. And then at the absolute bottom, there are usually examples for some of the more common functions. So you can see how this function would be used in an R script. And then there are also, above this example, other packages or commands that are related that you can click to. So if we want to look at the attach package, we can click to it. If you're searching for something within documentation, so let's say you want to understand what one of the arguments is, you can search with this secondary search box, search for a word within the documentation.